Okay? All right, so as we get started today, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the terms first. And you'll notice up here, Exam 1 study terms. And this is for everybody. It doesn't matter what class you're in. I'm going to go ahead and remove right off the top the ideology terms because I have not given you all these yet. So we're going to remove all the ideology terms. And why don't we start with Chapter 1. Have y'all got any questions about any of the terms up here that are from Chapter 1? Anybody at all?
What's who? What's who about?
Who is actually about the Declaration of Independence? Do you remember who wrote it?
Founding Fathers.
Is it well-bred, well-fed, well-wed?
That's kind of part of it, but who specifically wrote it?
Wasn't like the pale male and something?
Okay, that's part of it, but there was a specific name of a specific person.
Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson actually is given credit for writing it, and if you watch the Declaration cartoon, it'll mention people in there like Franklin and Livingston and folks like this. You can really impress me with some of those names. Who was it written about?
King of England.
King of England. How do you know that? What was the word that got repeated more than anything else? He endeavored to prevent. He did all of these negative things, dissolve, these kinds of things. Go back through and look at that because the word he demonstrates that it was about the king, and then there were a lot of negative verbs in there afterwards. So it was written by Jefferson, among others. It was written about the king primarily. Who was it written for? Who did they write it for when they wrote the Declaration?
Pale male and something else.
Well, now pale, male, and stale defined the Founding Fathers, but who did they write it for? Who were they trying to convince that they needed a revolution?
France and other countries.
France and other countries. They weren't actually writing it for the colonists because they either probably wouldn't have been able to understand or they were already upset because the taxes and their inability to trade and some of these other things that we had talked about. They were looking for allies, and ultimately France was the one that bit. Do you remember what the ultimate purpose was for the Declaration?
To separate from the oppression.
They are trying to separate from the British, but there's something a little bit more specific about. Go ahead. Legal justification for separation from Great Britain. And the idea basically was they were not just telling the British to go to hell, but they were kind of telling them to go to hell and giving them some specific reasons as far as why. And this is where you start getting into life, liberty, and property, or life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, if you remember. And that quote. Do you remember the quote that I had given you? It was in the 20s, I think. Do y'all remember the quote?
No.
This is actually up at the top of page 21, and bear with me while this heats up. You'll notice up here in the very top of 21, talking about the Declaration of Independence, it says, the Declaration forcefully asserts the equality of men and the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, a phrase that euphemistically expresses an inherent right to own private property. It asserts that these rights are not granted by humans but by God, and that they must be defended by government for enjoyment by each of its members. When government can no longer defend these rights or it actively threatens them, the people have the right to alter or abolish the government and replace it with another that is better able to do so. This is kind of an important quote. If you can pull me pieces of this, be a really good answer for the Declaration. Jefferson, King, France, legal justification for separation from Great Britain, and then you get into some of these pieces, of course the word he and whatnot. There's a number of things there. What other questions have y'all got from these terms, say from Chapter 1, as it heats back up? One that a lot of people have had questions about is 111.
Yeah.
And I think that's either 114 or 115 now on the new outline. That's the number of peaceful midterm and presidential elections in American history. So when I first made this several years ago, we've had a number of elections since. That's really what that is. What other questions have y'all got? Go ahead, Madalena, let it fly. You know all of them. Because I can start asking you what they are. Go ahead, Pearl.
Go ahead.
What's recall mean?
Recall. What was a recall election?
To vote
vote somebody out of office.
Yeah, a recall election. And do you remember the example that I had given you of a recall election?
Wasn't the California?
It was the California. And who was it that ultimately won that?
It was like Schwarzenegger.
Schwarzenegger, yeah, the governor. Arnold was the one. It was Gray Davis who was the governor. And there are two questions that are on the recall ballot. Do you remember who it was?
Do you
What
want
they
to
were?
recall? And if you check like yes or no, if you answer yes, you like pick who. And to get on there, you just have to have like a certain number of people, and like anyone can like get on the recall election.
Wow, Julie Brown is having like a blow dry day, but I don't think it's blow dry.
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Here's the, if you want to put yourself on camera so they can see your hair too, that's fine. But anyway,
Yeah, thanks.
two questions. Question number one on a recall ballot is, do you want to recall so-and-so from office? And in parentheses, after recall, it would say remove. And in California, it was Gray Davis. He had not done anything illegal, but he had misappropriated some monies. And when he misappropriated these monies, it led to a budget crisis, and people wanted him out. They did, a majority of them, say yes. And then the second question is, if they answered no, then they're done. But if they answer yes, then they've got to pick who it is that they want to replace him. And it was Schwarzenegger that had, in fact, gotten the win on this. You actually said this really well. First of all, this is an example, a recall election is an example of direct democracy. And if you remember, basically these are the people that are making the decision. They collected signatures, a percentage of signatures of registered voters in the state. They submitted it to the Board of Elections. The Board of Elections approved the signatures, and then, in fact, they had a special election for recall. In order to get on the ballot, all you had to do was collect a percentage of registered voters' signatures, and you could get on there. Do you remember some of the people that got on there?
There were like porn stars and like
Angelina.
rappers and like, wasn't there like a midget wrestler or something?
A midget wrestler.
Gary Coleman.
Oh, wow, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Gary Coleman, the little actor Gary Coleman, in fact, ran for governor. Schwarzenegger ran for governor. Mary Carey Cook was the porn star. Angeline was the stripper, and I think they had adult entertainer on there. Go ahead, Pearl.
So do you want examples of?
I want you to show me what you know. So we've given you the process in these last couple of minutes about the signatures and the Board of Elections. We've given you the two questions on here. We gave the California example and some of the people that ran. And the ultimate really kind of moral of all this is be careful what you wish for, because if the people are the ones that are deciding, that means that the people could be the ones that get elected, meaning the strippers or the porn stars or the actors in this case. Go ahead.
So what do you want us to say about Schoolhouse Rock?
What do y'all remember about Schoolhouse Rock?
They really implied life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as being women, because the man like chased the woman across the screen.
And what was the symbolism of that?
Women are property.
Women were actually considered as property. What was the trick with the woman on the other Schoolhouse Rock, the one that dealt with the preamble?
They were like, she was like short and like couldn't really vote, and like they like implied that like women don't vote, or like they're not really, they have a
I
voice.
think they implied that she was like a little kid, if
Yeah.
you look at it. And you would look at it as a little kid and say, oh, little kids aren't supposed to vote. But in reality, it was a woman, and they were saying that women couldn't vote there because she couldn't quite actually reach the ballot box. So, yeah, what I would pay attention to with Schoolhouse Rock, the Declaration of Independence is going to be the part that deals with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And make sure you know life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is in the Declaration. The preamble is We the People. And if you remember when they do that song, they do the preamble over and over in that song in Schoolhouse Rock. So make sure that you're familiar with the wording of the two different ones. What other questions have you got up here? Basically, let's go ahead and finish off chapter 1. Do you have anything else there?
What'd you want for order?
Well, there was freedom, there was order and equality, right? Y'all remember freedom, order, and equality?
And where? Like where would we have remembered that
We
from?
voted on it.
Yeah, we voted on it.
Which one did you care most about?
Freedom, what was freedom?
The right to what you want.
The right to do what you want. What was order, Madalena?
I guess law enforcement.
Law enforcement. Anybody got something different? Go ahead.
Regulations.
Regulations. Some people want to be free, some people want to be safe. And Julie Brown, the example that I had given was that I had balled up my fists and I said, if people are swinging their fists and in fact, everybody is basically just being free, sooner or later, if everybody starts to swing their
You're
fist,
too
Julie
close.
Brown,
You're too
what you're
close.
going to end up seeing is that people are going to start getting hit. And the thought is that if there's too much freedom, there's no order. Well, some people are going to want order. And really the tug of war is the more freedom you have, less order. The more order you have, less freedom. And it's really trying to find the balance. What was equality? Go ahead.
Being treated the same.
Everybody should be treated the same by the law, by the government. And when we voted on this, the classes were really different. Some of them really did believe in freedom. Many of them believed in equality. And one class, I think order did really well, but for the most part, order was on the low side of this. And what I would think about with that is think about the articles. The Catholic school teacher article that was dealing with the Catholic, the contract. There's freedom, order, and equality throughout that one. And that was the example of the article that I had given you that kind of illustrated those points. But the other thing, check out the video. Because Sarah's video online dealing with the Catholic school teacher and how to answer a short answer question would probably help you. Anything else from chapter 1? Because I know that this is the smallest chapter. Go ahead, Tomas.
Can you do initiative?
What was initiative? I had asked the question in class, and I asked this to all of them. If you wanted to pass a law, what would you do? Go ahead, Pearl.
Oh, never mind. Go ahead.
If you wanted to pass a law, what would you do? Where would you go?
Oh, you could write a letter to your representative, or you could make a petition.
Okay, initiative is kind of like recall, except instead of dealing with an elected official, you're dealing with writing a law. And basically what you do in an initiative is you're going to draft a bill, and then when you draft a bill, you're going to go around and you're going to get signatures, a percentage of signatures of registered voters. And then from there, when you get this percentage of signatures, they're going to validate, that these are really registered voters. And when you meet the percentage, it's going to go on the ballot as a yes or a no question. If a majority votes yes, it becomes law. If a majority votes no, the law is killed and it doesn't become law. And even if the governor is against it, even if the legislature is against it, this is another example of direct democracy because the people wrote it, the people signed it, the people submitted it, and then ultimately the people voted on it.
So is that the thing about turning right or turning left at the...
Yeah. Turning left
At the-
on a red, left turn on red on a one-way street. Yeah. Anybody else? Nicholas, I think I'd seen your hand.
Just for recall, you said that's not every state though, right?
Yeah, not every state has recall, not every state has initiative either, and it's most of the time, a lot of the more western states, they're a little bit more independent out there, they're a little bit newer, quite frankly, these kinds of things, so you'll see that more maybe in the more western states as you go further west, but they are kind of scattered around the country, yes. Anything else from chapter 1?
Political science, do you want us to say if it's a science, if it's really a science?
Well, those would really just be definitions. Politics, politicians, and political science. And I don't know that political science is going to be one of the best, ones. If it is, it's going to be a 2-point question. But politics, we have talked about politics an awful lot. The idea that people can look at something, the same thing, and they can see something very different. And if you remember with politics, the example I had given you is you need to have dirt in order to make the flowers grow. You need politics in order to get laws, and people don't like politics, but it's kind of a necessary evil. Go ahead.
Can you define political science?
Anybody? Political science?
It's the study of who gets what, when, and where. The allocation of power, I guess.
Wow, okay. The way I had basically said it was basically going to be the study of politics, and if you remember, politics, politicians, and, government, politics, and politicians. So it's going to be the study of the processes and the institutions by which people govern each other. It's going to be the study of the results of those politics, and those processes and institutions, the bills that we pass, the people that we elect, and then it's going to be the politicians, the people in and around government. So it's going to be the study of all of those things. All of those things. But I don't know that you should stress too much about political science. Anything in chapter, well, let me go to the articles really quick. And there were 3 articles that we had dealt with from chapter 1, and these are all in there now. You've got the Catholic school teacher, well, matter of fact, maybe they're not all in there. Catholic school teacher and sex shop patrons. Do y'all remember, you have any questions about the Catholic school teacher article? Everybody good as far as that's concerned? What would you say if you got the Catholic school teacher article on an exam?
that they're not really subjected to the same laws because they're not funded by the government.
What was her name?
Is that really important?
Well, yeah, that's pretty
She
important.
taught
detail.
math.
And she was really
What was her name?